Do you have aspirations of joining the Labour Party but are concerned that any political association could come back to bite you later down the track, particularly if you want to go to the private sector and you consider damaged goods because of 5 years you spent being politically active? If you do have those concerns, you are not alone. That is a very commonly asked question for people, or commonly asked concern for people wanting to join the Buck-Holden Academy. But the good news is that this situation is very manageable. And if you are aware of this situation going into it, you can very much structure your bid for pre-selection in a way that will help rather than hurt you when you return to the private sector if you do wish to do so and want to keep that door open. Which obviously for anyone in their 20s, unless you want to be a career politician for the rest of your life, probably will mean going back to the private sector at some point. Now, it is illegal for employers to discriminate on the basis of association to a registered political party. That might change down the track. I don't think it will. But it is illegal for employers to do that. However, I do think there is still some truth in the concern. And that truth is the fact that people with associations with a left-wing political party usually have a couple of connotations that might create a negative stigma in an employer's head. Now, I don't think these are entirely unfair either. When I'm talking about a possible employee here, I'm not talking about some right-wing employer. I'm just talking about a political person who hears of someone associated with the Labour Party and go, ooh, I've got some concerns here. I think the main three concerns that employer will have is one is that they're possibly divisive. Now, obviously, I think that this is far more true of a more extreme party like the Greens than a major party, because major parties have to be coalitions to get things done. But I do appreciate the concern. There will be some concern that you are divisive. And so it's just really important that in your bid for pre-selection, you avoid divisive stunts that might give you a short-term boost, but come back to bite if that gets dug up later down the track. Obviously, workplaces rely on unity. The great sin in any workplace is division amongst the staff. How many workplaces have you been at where someone might be actually quite good at the core fundamentals of their job, but their poor social skills or their divisive nature actually tears the team apart, and it's easier to replace one person than to replace 5 people. So even though they might be the best performer in their particular field, they're not considered valuable because they actually cause 5 people to want to go find jobs elsewhere. So being divisive is a really big thing. It's got nothing to do with politics itself, but it can find itself often through political expression. The second thing is that employers are going to be a bit skeptical of people who are crusaders. Now, I am distinguishing the term crusaders from those who just have a strong sense of moral justice. I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. In this entirely nebulous or entirely semantic term that I've made up, I think what defines a crusader according to criteria that I'm going to use today is that a crusader is someone who makes things difficult because everything comes back to a philosophical question, or everything comes back to a point of is that justice or not. And so let's just say you work for Jim's Mowing, or you got to go mow lawns. You got to go mow lawns on the other side of the city. Your boss sends you off over there, but you go, I'm not going to drive because that's bad for the environment. I'm going to take public transport instead, but just makes the day extend that much further because it takes that much longer to get there. That's going to be obviously very difficult to employer as well. And then finally, I think the big issue that will face people who are in a left-wing political party is just the connotation of being unreliable. Let's just imagine you're a 60-year-old man employing people for a job. You don't know much about younger generations, but you get this picture of postmodernism in the fact that truth is defined by interpretation, and that very often, like for younger generations, they're using their feelings and their lived experiences to say what is true and untrue, which I think the great sin for our generation is that this has meant that we're so much more flaky because we define truth through how we feel. Often when what we feel or what we want to do doesn't match up with what we have planned to do, we can often find a whole range more of excuses to not actually go and do the thing that we were asked or required to do. And so I think there will be connotations of being unreliable and being flaky because you just don't want to do something. These are all connotations that anyone who's in a left-wing party needs to make sure that they're divorced from. So I think, let's just say every step, like every branch meeting you attended, every step you took along the way to pre-selection is documented, which obviously it never would be. But if it is, I think these are the 3 connotations you want to avoid to make sure that a path back into politics doesn't come back to, a path back into the private sector isn't hampered by your journey into politics. So, can you be discriminated upon on the basis of your political association? Legally, no. Practically, there's some bad connotations that I think anyone in the private sector is going to have to overcome. Now, all that being said, this is entirely manageable. The first reason as to why this is an entirely manageable situation is you really don't have to do anything publicly until you become a candidate. Every step along that journey can be you can do it with a very low profile. And so it is very low risk early on. If you join your local branch, there is no risk to your private career. And if like, I don't know, if you had a boss that went, "Oh, I noticed you're at that lefty snowflake branch of the Labour Party. What are you doing, man? I'm not going to give you shifts anymore." You have a court case on your hands, and you have a very strong discrimination case on your hands. Secondly, why would you want to work for that person anyway? Again, that's a very unreasonable interpretation of events. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm technically an employer. I employ people through contract work. If someone was a member of the Liberal Party and went to Liberal branch meetings, obviously there's no way that I would treat them any differently. In fact, secondly, I'd actually go, good, they're actually participating in democracy and they're following through on their political beliefs in a constructive way, or a way that they think is constructive and not just out there having a whinge. They're trying to actually enact change. Cool, no worries. Keep editing my video. I've got no issue with that. So I really do. I think it'd take a pretty unreasonable employer to hold that against you to ever begin with. But then secondly, none of it has to be made public. You don't have to tell people. You can go to your branches quietly. Again, you can go to events quietly. You can choose to some extent where you go door knocking. So I don't know if you're doing door knocking, you don't have to go anywhere near your boss's house. So it really doesn't require you to have that much of a public profile while you're involved in the Labour Party. And so you can actually do a lot of the scoping out yourself. You can see if you can build a strong enough profile to actually launch a bid for pre-selection before anyone knows about it. And if not, just go back to the private sector quietly without anyone really knowing anything. It's kind of what I did with Mr. M, actually. Mr. M was a faceless channel. It was just a giraffe. And then, yeah, for a good 2 years there, no one knew it. I didn't tell anyone, really, apart from my family and a couple of close friends. Grew it to about 10,000 subscribers, and then the face came out, the giraffe fell off, and yeah, when everyone I knew then started to know about it. So you really can just scope it out. And at any point in that Mr. M journey, I could have just backed out without anyone knowing and just gone back to teaching really without that much of a profile. So it's important to note that there are a couple of different categories as well that will be relevant when it comes to employment. Membership is not the same as activism, which is not the same as being a candidate. Only 2 of the 3 of those are public. Again, like, it's not, there's no database that's publicly accessible. And even if it was, what employer would actually look up on the database? Oh, is my employee involved in the Labour Party? The other thing as well is that constructive party membership can help in many industries, and you can actually fully put it on your resume as an asset rather than as a hindrance, because there is, again, how many jobs, if you work in the private sector, require strong engagement with the government. And so if you actually know how the government works, I don't know, let's just say I'm an employer and I need, approvals going through and I have to deal with the government. I'm like, oh, actually, you've got a pretty good understanding of how all this works. Can you walk me through what's the government looking for on their end to make sure that I'm fully up to code? And there's just so many opportunities that if someone's actually had involvement with party politics would be an asset to a business. Again, collaboration with stakeholders. And then as well, like to say, okay, I'm not fully up to date with what the law is here. You were involved in policy ideas. Is this up to scratch? Is this up to standard? It's not the same as having a lawyer, I take that point. But I don't know, just for anyone who's in just a regular workplace that doesn't have access to a legal team, that's probably your next best option. And I think in a lot of career paths, that can actually be really helpful. And so you really don't have to, it doesn't have to be an either or between career or having a bid at politics and having a bid at pre-selection. Pre-selection is determined well before the election cycle. Again, I'm pretty I try and keep in the loop. I've said this before, I'm not a Labour Party member, but I try and keep in the loop. My local member for state politics just got pre-selected again. I had no idea that the pre-selection was happening until she announced it. And I'm pretty, as much as you can be in the loop without actually being a member of the Labour Party. So pre-selection, it's really determined before anything goes public, and dare I say, your boss could not care less about it. The other thing as well, as we talk about risks, every decision that you make in your life is a risk. Inaction and not taking action or not considering a possibility in politics because you've got concerns about other areas is a risk as well. Not taking any action on anything is highly risky. So again, it's not really an either or. And then I might do the possibly unforgivable, and I might use Mark Arbib as an example of someone who's had great private career success since leaving politics. Jeez, this is not going to fly with the only the rusted on Labor people can stay with me for this one. And actually I'll say it again, only the rusted on New South Wales Labor right people can stay with me for this one. Anyway, Mark Arbib, not an endorsement of him. Obviously, I have huge issues with his conduct when he was a federal senator, and also have issues with his career choices going into gambling. But thankfully, he managed to pivot away from gambling after leaving office, was on the board for Sydney FC, now is going to be the CEO for the Australian Olympic Committee. Again, it's a pretty obvious case. And I think for the Australian Olympic Committee, it's a good coup. It makes sense. He is widely regarded as competent, had a lot of experience in managing quite difficult situations, internal party politics, keeping a coalition together. Obviously, he didn't do that very well because he knifed Kevin Rudd to take the point. But he has relevant experience that is going to help him in the private sector. And if I'm a private company, I'm like, actually, yeah, he's probably going to excel pretty well in the role that he's in. So even if you have a career like Mark Habib's in politics, which was not marred by, I guess, personal scandal, but marred by factional politics and a lot of the dirtier aspects of the New South Wales Labor Party at the time, you still can actually emerge to have quite a successful private career as well. So if you have concerns, first thing I'll do is I'll join your local branch and just start going to branch meetings. You don't have to do anything publicly. You don't have to post anything online or do anything like that. Just go quietly and start to build your profile. Again, the next step you can take after that is making sure that, that you are not just meeting people and starting to get involved with the party, but actually equipping yourself to be a good candidate, which would require reading in your particular area. A book a month is probably a fair enough place to start. And then lastly, if you are so inclined, you can always join the Barcaldine Academy. There are loads of people on the Discord now. It's a very, very active Discord. So you can join there and get to meet people without even having to leave the comfort of your own home. You can get yourself up to speed with your state's labour history doing the modules. And it's a very easy place to start if you are hoping to join the Labor Party and are serious about going into politics, but still do have those concerns around going back to a private job if it doesn't work out, or if you decide that politics isn't for you. So those are the action steps that you can take, and it is not a case of either or.